Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. If you look around, you'll see many different faces. You'll see males and females. You'll see many different religions. You'll see many different colors. People don't necessarily look alike. There are different visages. They come from different environments. But everybody shares the same dilemma. Everybody shares the fact that they've been thrown into this world without an instruction booklet. Everybody is here and everybody is trying to find their way. And not everyone is fortunate enough to have somebody guide them through the morass of what this life has to offer. So they take what they see and they conclude what they conclude based on the meanderings of the mind. The mind looks at things and comes to conclusions, and then people function according to that. And within each culture, within each society, there is a certain framework on how to do things and what's important. If you're an Eskimo, you learn about what to do within snow and the important things to do within that environment. If you live in a tropical island, you have a different set of circumstances that you have to adjust to and that you have to live in. If you live in first world countries where education is important, you get worldly education, and that becomes what seems to be important. Constantly, beings are looking for satisfaction. They're looking for pleasure. They're looking for somehow to get some, to extract some joy from the world. But this world is an upside down place. And people don't realize that the joy that the body gets from this world is opposite to wisdom. They don't realize that the driving force in their life, desire, is opposite to wisdom. The great pleasure of man, the sexual drive, is opposite to wisdom. Um, the Hadrat Ali once said that man's greatest pleasure, his genital pleasure, comes from where he exudes his bodily fluids when they're done, when he's done with them. He was showing the absurdity of what we consider so great. The truth is that the joys of the world are not real. There is another set of joys, and they are in a different place. The joy that is true is the joy that is internal. And there is a light within the body. There is a joy within inside the body. The man who has analytic wisdom understands this great joy within the body. He understands this great beauty within the body. There is nothing more beautiful than what Allah has put within us because He has made it His home. Allah lives within us, within that great light that is His. And we have to become cognizant of that presence within us and that light within us. There is nothing more beautiful than that. And if we can understand that light And if we can see that light, then we will begin to understand ourselves. And then we'll begin to understand that we are children of God. And it is our responsibility to show what the child of God has within him. And what he has within him is the qualities of God, the 99 vilayats, the names, and the 3,000 gracious qualities. And what we should show, what we should present to the world are those qualities, not the mind. The mind is going to show all of the things that interface with the world, and it is constantly going to mistake worldly pleasures for reality. And those pleasures are not real. And you can't depend on them. All of those pleasures are fleeting, and they dissipate and they disappear. And we should not fall in love with that which is temporary. We should fall in love with that which is eternal. And to fall in love with that which is eternal, we have to understand what is eternal. And that means beginning to understand the nature of God and how it is that he exists. So we have to understand God's makeup. Those who think, those who analyze, will conclude that God is everywhere. There is no space without God. Yet, God has no form. God is not elemental. God has no spouse. God has no children. God has no favorites. God is kindness and mercy towards all without limitation. Man, on the other hand, tries to limit God to his understanding, and man's understanding is almost always egocentric based. So when man thinks about God, he thinks about God as his God through his view of God and through his way of seeing God. Now, this world is full of gods. In the Hindu religion, there are so many gods. In Buddhism, there are so many gods. In Zoroastrianism, they worship fire. And then there are the ones who are monotheistic. But everyone has even the monotheists have different ways of looking at God. And even though they are monotheists, they claim that their God is different than the other God of other monotheists. There's this complete confusion as to the nature of God and as to worship. But God's reality is transcendent. It's transcendent beyond religion. So if you are in a religion, and if you practice the religion, and if you practice the religion the way the religion tells you, which is the exclusion of other religions, to the denigration of other religions, to the understanding that your pathway is the only true pathway, you've lost the sense of the transcendence of what is going on. We have to go beyond religion. We have to go beyond all of the dictates of religion. We have to go beyond the differences in all of the religions. We have to go beyond the separations in all of the religions. And we have to come to conclusions that have a unity within them that is all inclusive. We cannot forget that God made every one of us, not just some of us. That God favors every one of us, not just some of us. That God protects every one of us, not just some of us. That God's grace flows through this world like rain and rains on everyone, not just some of us. Yet, the world, in its misunderstanding of things, tries to make God exclusive. And everyone tries to make God exclusive to them. And in doing that, in that act, they have cut God off from themselves. Because when you separate yourself from those who are created by God and who have God within them, you are creating a separation between yourself and God. So let's say you're in a religion that's 20% of the population of the world. So you've accepted 20% of the population of the world, but you've rejected 80% of the population of the world. And who gives you the right? What gives us the right to reject 80% of the population of the world? Who are we to come to those kinds of conclusions? It has to do with cultural buildups through mind interaction with the world, engrossed in egocentric ideas about the importance of self and the importance of self in relationship to God. God is common to all. And our great glory is in understanding that. Because once we understand that, we become open to all. And when we become open to all, then we are truly conveying God's message and God's love for all of humanity. It is when we cut off that love, when we separate people from that love, when we separate ourselves from that love, for all kinds of reasons, that we fall into the traps that Satan has planted. People separate themselves because of real estate. People separate themselves because of control. People separate themselves because of power struggles. People separate themselves for color reasons. People separate themselves for cult reasons, for sect reasons. There are so many reasons that people separate themselves. In Hinduism, they created an entire hierarchy of separations. The entire religion was based on separation. And Gandhi, who began to discover the caste system and its faults, once said, I used to think the religion was truth, but then I learned that only God is truth, and the religions can steer you from truth. And this is what has to be understood, that that which man relies on as his ticket to heaven, the religion, is often counterfeit. It's not a real ticket. It's like when Khomeini was passing out plastic keys to his 14-year-old soldiers, telling them that with this key, when they died, they would go to heaven. This is the work of so many of the people who call themselves holy. They are caught up within the confines of their own religion and trying to make that into something greater than anything else. We have to learn, we have to conclude, and we somehow have to come to the realization of equality. And in this realization of equality, we have to begin to understand the unity in existence. And it's in the unity of existence that the true glory exists. We are not separate lights um, disconnected from each other traveling around the world. We are part of one light that is unified, that is all encompassing, that is the entire creation, and that is connected to that which has no beginning and has no end, and which is omnipresent everywhere, and which controls and rules this universe through light, and which is all that exists. And we are part of that. We are not separate from that. And in religion and in the world, so much time is spent teaching separateness. One religion talks about the foibles in the other religion. The other religion then talks about all the mistakes of the religion that criticizes them. Then another religion comes along and says, you're both wrong. I'm the only one who knows. And this is the way of man. Man has not transcended. And when untranscended man tries to teach religion, he is going to teach an untranscended version of religion, a religion that is caught in the assumption that it is somehow tied to the world, tied to a specific prophet, and tied to a specific way. All of the prophets taught the same thing. All of the prophets taught one truth. All of the prophets came to bring enlightenment to man, but not separate enlightenment. And what's happened is man has, in his mind consciousness, in his limited consciousness, in his intellectual consciousness, as opposed to wisdom, taken on the prophet that came to his specific geography or his specific societal set, and they have made that reality, and then began to compare it to all others and talk about the differences instead of talking about the similarities. So if we look at the world this way and we begin to understand that the world acts this way, then we have to begin to look at the world with a grain of salt. We have to begin to look at the world as if the world has lost its way. And the world has, in fact, lost its way. The world doesn't believe in God anymore. The world says it believes in God, but it believes in its politicians. The world says it believes in God, but it believes in its armies. The world says it believes in God, but it believes in the power of countries. It doesn't believe in God. We have to become the ones who do, in fact, believe in God. Now, that is going to put you outside of the world. That is going to put you separate from the ones who believe in all those other things. In America right now, politics has become religion. It's become to the point that people fight over politics as if they were fighting over their own lives. And in truth, it has very little to do with their lives. But when you transfer power when you transfer your power to the government, when you transfer your truth and think that the government is somehow going to make your life better, you've lost your way. Governments aren't what's going to save you. God is what's going to save you. And as we begin to turn ourselves towards God, then all of the happenings within the world become less and less important, because we know that in truth, all that exists is God. All there is La ilaha illallah. Nothing exists but God, and I do not exist. And as long as I think that I am separate from that Godhead, I am lost, and I am floating in that which is irrelevant. I am floating in that which has no purpose. I am floating in that which has no meaning. I am floating in my own imagination. I am floating in the imagination of what I think the world is like, not what the world is really like. We believe too strongly in the world. We believe too strongly that the world can save us. We believe too strongly that the world can carry us and take us to contentment. It cannot. The world can only take you to the end of this body. There is another world beyond this body. When a goat dies, it stinks after a few days. When a man dies, he also stinks after a few days. When the power of God leaves the body has no meaning. The body has no purpose. Each man within him has benevolence. Each man within him has the ability to do good. Each man has within him the unity with all of existence. But if he forgets this, he's lost his way. So it's up to each of us to remember ourselves, to remember who we are and what our true calling is. God is an effulgence. This effulgence is this great light that gives off rays. These rays were covered in the miracle of creation by the elements, and we became bodies. But these bodies all contain the rays of that effulgent light. So we are different, yet we are entirely the same. And if we lose touch with the fact that we are different, yet entirely the same, we have lost touch with truth. We then live a secondary truth based on the visual perception, the sensual perceptions that we have. And this is part of the dilemma. Many men cannot see beyond their sensual perceptions. So they've created a world for themselves that deals with the interaction of sensual perception. And sensual perception becomes their way of dealing with the world. So if there is sensual satisfaction, it's good. If there's sensual deprivation, it's bad. If there is a way to make the self bigger, that's good. If the self is made less, that's bad. But this self isn't real. This self is a temporary manifestation that has a time limit and will dissipate over time. And we have each fallen in love with that sensual being that is ourselves. and there is no future in it. The future of it is demise, and we have to understand that. So we have to shift our thought process. We have to shift that which we love. We have to shift that which we are trying to accomplish. So here we are, all of us in this world, working to accomplish things within the world. We all want jobs. We all want to earn money. We all want to make ourselves more important. Yet in the end, none of these things mean anything because they can't take you beyond that point where the body disappears. It can't take you to eternity. And there is an eternity. There is an eternity, but that eternity is different than our connection to the world. So we have all been taught how important the world is. And we've been all been taught how we have to accomplish things in the world and what we have to do in the world. We've all been told about this obligation we have to make the world a better place and to make ourselves better in it. And there's some truth to all of that. But the greater truth is that we have to begin to do the work on our inner self as opposed to working for the world. We have to set aside time for our soul. We have to set aside time for beginning to understand the true nature of who we are. And to do that, we have to study the true nature of what God is. God is transcendent to all of these things. He's beyond them. He's above them. He sees things from a different perspective. We are caught in the middle of this world, and our vision is clouded because all we see is through our senses. We have to develop a new way of seeing things. How do we see that which has no form? How do we see that which has no shape? How do we see that which cannot be seen by the eyes? This dilemma is too difficult for most men. This dilemma stops them in their tracks and makes it impossible for them to escape into true freedom. But if you have the insight to understand the quality of love, and you have the insight to understand the nature of love and the power of love, you can then see that when true love enters into your being, that which you look at with your eyes is not what you see. You see an empathetic nature on the other side of you, and you see what love can do to lift the nature of others and to bring them into focus. Love is a great healer. Love is a great medicine. Love is a great cure, but it can't be involved with race or religion or color or the specter of what people look like. It has to be able to see beyond that. Why do we give so much credit to people like Mother Teresa who spend their life with dying people? Because she has transcended the normal worldly um, things that we believe man should be doing. She's helping those who are disappearing. She's helping the transition. She's helping them go into the next phase of their existence. Are we helping anybody go into the next phase of their existence? Are we helping ourselves go into the next phase of the existence? There's nothing more beautiful than a man who has mercy inside of himself, who gives out that mercy to all of humanity. There's truth in that. There's reality in that. Why? Because that's what God does. God is mercy, and he gives mercy to his creation. And if we connect with God and do his work with him in creation, then we have transcended religion. Then we have transcended the world. Then we have transcended the difficulties within life. And then we have transcended the petty nature of our existence. But it's only when we give that we can do this. It's only when we realize that what we give has to be what God gives. So there's charity, and then there's qualities, and we have to give both. We have to be able to give of the world because since we're in the world, people need the bounty of the world to accomplish certain things. But they also have to understand the nature of the holy, pure qualities of God. And the way they understand that is through manifest beings taking on the mantle of showing that to the world. And this is the work of a sheikh. He comes to be an exemplar of the qualities of reality. His attitude towards things is not petty. His love is constant and consistent. His mercy never ceases. Anger doesn't enter into his milieu. He is constantly kind and he is constantly helpful. He is constantly giving off the resonance of reality. And if you are in contact with him, if you are close to him, that resonance of reality permeates you. Why are people drawn to the presence of the Sheikh? Because he gives off a resonance of permanence. He gives off a resonance of eternity. He gives off a resonance of kindness and mercy. When we were with Bawa, we felt a real sense of protection. Nothing could harm us because we were at the center of the world. We were at the center of existence. Why were we at the center of existence? Because God's qualities were adjacent to us. And anytime you are next to God's qualities, you are in the center of existence. Anywhere you go, you can be in that place. But the problem is, can you be cognizant that you're in that place? And when you're with the sheikh, you became cognizant that you were in that place because his personal power of transcendence and empathy and resonance was so powerful that as soon as you walked into his presence, you knew God was there. And we have to develop that within ourselves or everywhere that we go. We have to develop that for ourselves, for all of our interaction with humanity. We have to develop that so that we become those who are an aid to those who've never been taught the truth. Your desires will kill you. The body and the mind have limits. And if we try to make our life within those limits, we are doomed to repeating this over and over. Water turns into blood, blood turns into flesh, and flesh has blood attachments. Understanding God is beyond blood. Understanding God is beyond these attachments. And as long as we are attached to blood, and as long as we have blood attachments, we will be limited in our ability to transcend, because those who are closest to us will be most important to us. We will not be able to see things in an equal way. We won't be able to see strangers as ourselves. We won't be able to see people of other color as ourselves, other religions as ourselves. We will be full of differences. And you can't be full of differences. Nothing is equal to God's power. And so anything that we trust within the world is limited. Anything that we trust within the world has its end. It can only go so far. And all of these things have energies. All of the elements have energies. All of the elements have arrogance. And if we tie ourselves to any of these things, we tie ourselves to that arrogance that comes with them. There's arrogance in water, there's arrogance in earth, there's arrogance in fire. It's very easy to see the arrogance in fire. It exists in all of the elements. Each of them have an arrogance, and we're made up of those elements. So we have to overcome the arrogance of the elements that cover our truth. Somehow we have to break through that and stop believing in that arrogance and understand the kindness and the love that lies right beneath that. There's benevolence in each of us, but in that benevolence is God. And without God, that benevolence cannot exist. So we have to turn everything over to God. And then that which is irrelevant will begin to disappear. Otherwise, our life will be spent in irrelevance. He is integral to our existence. And when he finds us fit and suited, he will show us the truth. And we have to believe that. We have to have the patience and the belief system that as we grow, as we become more, as we let go of our blood attachments, as we let go of our ties to the world, as we stop believing in the world and start believing in God, he will turn towards us and show us reality. He will show us the truth. He will let us understand the secrets of creation. He will let us understand reality. When you're looking for a place to rest and you see a tree, sit on the tree. Don't sit on the branches. You sit on the branches, they're going to break and you're going to fall off. Find something solid to believe in. And what's solid is God. Find that tree that is God and attach yourself to that. Let go of all of the peripherals. There's not a single space in this creation that is without God. It is by his grace that we function, and it is through his will that we exist. We have to understand that. We have to give ourselves up to understanding that. And we have to surrender that that which he wants for us is truth and reality. He wants to give us his kingdom. To do that, we have to surrender to him. To surrender to him, we have to understand his nature. And when we understand his nature, we have to imbibe his nature and become that nature. So man has to become godly. Man has to become godlike. Man has to take on the qualities of God. Man has to be the qualities of God. And in that, we will find our freedom. In that, we will find our transcendence. And in that, we will find our eternal existence. May it happen for each and every one of us. Amen.